For nearly 3 decades, James Brolin has measured his life in mornings beside one woman. He once said sleeping was a waste of time because he couldn't wait to see Barbra Streisand's face at dawn. Now at 84, the man who kept journals of their days together is said to be writing entries he never imagined. As whispers swirl about health battles and quiet retreats from the spotlight, Brolin is facing a season that feels heavier than any role he has ever played. The man who counted his life in mornings. James Brolin has never been the kind of man who sells love with poetry. He doesn't talk about destiny or magic or the kind of passion that burns the sky down. When he speaks about his marriage to Barbra Streisand, he talks about mornings, about waking up and turning his head on the pillow, about reading newspapers side by side, about making phone calls from bed, because neither of them feels like getting up yet. It sounds simple, almost ordinary, but that ordinariness is exactly what he treasures. He once laughed during a television interview and said the best investment they ever made was their mattress. People chuckled, assuming it was a joke with a wink. It was funny, yes, but it was also honest. That bed became the center of their shared life. They worked there, argued there, planned there, scripts were read, speeches were rehearsed, lyrics were discussed. In a world where their careers pulled them in different directions for decades, that mattress became neutral ground. No stage lights, no red carpets, just two aging people choosing to stay close. When they met in early July in the mid-90s, neither of them was looking for fireworks. They had already done that part. She had survived a marriage that collapsed under pressure. He had walked through 2 divorces and serious financial strain. He was older, cautious, and carrying debt from the past. She was fiercely independent, long accustomed to controlling her own space. Their blind date could have been just another polite dinner with mutual friends. Instead, they talked for hours. She remembers teasing him about his hair the moment she saw him. He has admitted that it stung a little. For a split second, he thought about turning around and leaving, but he didn't. Something steadier than pride kept him in that chair. Later, he would say he felt calm around her in a way he hadn't expected. Not dazzled, not overwhelmed, just steady. They married exactly 2 years later on the same day. They met in her backyard overlooking the ocean. It was a grand event on paper. Celebrity, security, careful planning. But at its heart, it was deeply personal. In his speech that night, he said every evening with her felt new. He confessed that he used to battle insomnia for decades, restless and wired. With her, he finally learned how to sleep. From the start, they built their marriage with structure. They kept finances separate to avoid the bitterness he had experienced before. They agreed that if arguments became heated, they would pause and walk, literally walk around their property in opposite directions, breathing, cooling down, refusing to let pride make permanent damage. Take a walk, he often says when asked about longevity. It sounds almost too simple, but they followed it. Now in their 80s, love doesn't look like building something bigger. It looks like preserving something fragile. There are fewer premieres, fewer long trips, more quiet evenings, more mornings counted carefully. At this stage, he knows time is no longer an abstract idea stretching endlessly ahead. It is measured in shared breakfasts, shared books, shared silence. James Brolin does not count awards when he talks about his life. He counts mornings. Barbara's second act and the body that demanded attention. Barbra Streisand built her entire life on refusal. Refusal to change her nose when executives hinted it would help. Refusal to lower her voice to sound sweeter. Refusal to hand creative control to men who believed they knew better. As a teenager drifting between couches and borrowed beds, she learned quickly that if she didn't defend herself, no one would. That instinct never left her. On Broadway, she argued to keep songs others thought were too strange. In film, she fought for the right to direct when very few women were trusted behind the camera. She pushed back against unequal pay. She challenged studios that underestimated her. For decades, she stood at the center of rooms full of powerful men and did not blink. But somewhere along the way, the battle shifted. It wasn't about scripts or salaries anymore. It was about statistics. She had read a piece about how heart disease affects women differently than men, and how often those differences were ignored. The numbers unsettled her. Women were dying at higher rates than many realized. Symptoms were brushed off as stress or indigestion. Research funding lagged behind. She was stunned that something so common could remain so misunderstood. So she did what she has always done when something felt wrong. She got involved. She helped launch initiatives aimed at closing the gender gap in cardiovascular research. She lent her name and resources to a women's heart center in Los Angeles. She spoke publicly about how a heart attack in a woman doesn't always look like the dramatic chest-clutching scene from a movie. It can be nausea, jaw pain, exhaustion that feels like the flu, a dull ache in the back. She wanted women to recognize those signs before it was too late. At home, she tried to live what she preached. She trained regularly, sticking with a fitness routine for decades. She favored vegetables, fish, lighter meals, though she admitted she loved good food and could be tempted like anyone else. There was discipline there, but not obsession, just awareness. From the outside, she seemed steady. She released a massive memoir after years of handwriting drafts. She appeared when she chose to. She supported James at events. She posted about grandchildren. Her public image remained controlled, intentional, and then something changed. Not dramatically, not overnight, but gradually. Invitations were declined more often. Appearances grew rare. When she skipped a screening of one of James's projects, people noticed. He told reporters she was healthy. Friends insisted she was simply choosing privacy. Others suggested she was tired of the spectacle, tired of the expectation to show up simply because cameras were waiting. There was no official announcement, no diagnosis disclosed, no dramatic confession. But when someone who once thrived in the spotlight begins to retreat, it invites questions. James remained consistent in his message. She was fine. She was active. She was choosing peace. And perhaps that was true. Or perhaps fine meant something more layered, the way it often does for people in their 80s who understand their bodies better than anyone else, but share less about them publicly. Barbara Streisand has never owed the world transparency about her health. Yet the quiet shift in her presence feels significant because for so long she was everywhere on stage, on screen, on podiums advocating for change. Now her world appears smaller, more contained: dogs, gardens, evenings by the ocean, and a husband who counts his mornings beside her. The woman who once fought every room may simply be choosing which battles are still worth the energy. The cost of quiet. In recent years, the image of Barbara Streisand has grown smaller, not in stature, but in visibility. Stories began circulating about how rarely she leaves her Malibu estate. Now, mornings spent trimming roses before the sun gets too high. Evenings walking slowly along the property with the dogs, watching the Pacific turn gold and then gray. Long dinners at home instead of crowded award shows. The woman who once commanded arenas seemed content inside her own gates. Some people called it serenity. Others called it withdrawal. Those who admire her see a legend finally choosing rest after decades of fighting for every inch of respect she earned. Those who thrive on speculation ask harder questions. Why skip certain premieres? Why step back so noticeably? Why let silence replace appearances that once felt automatic? James Brolin does not indulge those questions publicly. While she has reduced her schedule, he continues to move. He signed on to a Western drama, stepping into the boots of a rancher whose story ends before the final episode. He lent his voice to a fantasy series that reached a younger audience far removed from his generation. At 84, he talks about future projects with energy that surprises people half his age. He insists he is not winding down, but those close to him say something has shifted. He has quietly declined roles that would have required long travel. He has rearranged commitments so he can return home quickly. He has turned down opportunities that once would have been too tempting to ignore. The drive that carried him through decades of work is still there, but it now bends around one priority: home. For years, he spoke proudly about keeping finances separate, about the discipline of what he once called bifurcation. It was a lesson learned from earlier marriages and painful divorces. Independence, even within love, felt necessary. But time changes even the most rigid philosophies. Practical needs override old principles. When health concerns begin to hover, even privately, money becomes less about autonomy and more about stability. No official diagnosis has been shared. No statement has confirmed illness. Yet, Anyone who has loved deeply understands how quickly fear can enter a room without announcement. You notice small changes, more rest, fewer public outings, a certain carefulness in planning. On television, Brolin smiles easily. He jokes about their expensive mattress, about working side by side from bed, about loving to sleep late. The audience laughs. It sounds charming, even enviable. But beneath the humor, there is something softer. The way he emphasizes being next to her, the way he repeats that their best ideas happen close together. It is the language of someone who knows proximity matters. For decades, their life was measured in events, premieres, awards, state dinners, tours. Now, it seems measured in quiet routines, shared coffee, crossword puzzles, gentle walks, the kind of ordinary moments that once would have felt insignificant. Quiet as a cost. It removes applause. It shrinks the world. It invites rumors. But it also protects what remains. Whether there's a serious medical battle unfolding behind closed doors or simply the natural slowing that comes with age, James Brolin appears to understand one thing clearly. Time is no longer theoretical. It is personal. And whatever roles he plays on screen, his most important one is waiting for him at home. Every morning he wakes up beside her, a history of fighting and surviving. To understand what this moment means for Brolin, you have to understand the road that brought him here. Born during a sweltering Los Angeles summer, he grew up under a strict father and a mother who once brushed against the entertainment world, but kept it hidden. As a boy with severe asthma, he spent long stretches in hospital beds. He idolized James Dean, studied his mannerisms, filmed silent reenactments with neighborhood kids. When studios demanded he change his name, he fought it, then accepted it. When early projects failed, he faced unemployment and humiliation. At one point, he repaired cars for a living, sleeping in his vehicle, uncertain whether Hollywood had already forgotten him. Then came a breakthrough television role that restored his footing. Awards followed. Film roles expanded his range. He survived flops, TYP casting, career droughts. He built stability slowly. Strine's path was equally hard. Poverty after her father's death, rejection for her appearance, critics questioning her face, even while praising her voice. She battled sexism while directing films that studios doubted would succeed. She endured personal heartbreak and professional skepticism, yet never softened her resolve. When these two finally found each other, they were not naive romantics. They were veterans. Perhaps that is why their marriage lasted. It was built on negotiation, listening, therapy when needed, and the simple discipline of walking away before words caused damage. Now, in the later chapter of their lives, survival looks different. It is no longer about fighting studios or headlines. It is about preserving health, energy, and dignity. What goodbye really means. The phrase saying goodbye carries weight, especially when attached to a couple who define late-in-life romance. But goodbye does not always mean death. Sometimes it means goodbye to public appearances, goodbye to relentless schedules, goodbye to the expectation of constant visibility. For Strine, stepping back from red carpets may be liberation rather than decline. After decades performing, directing, producing, advocating, and fighting inequity, she may simply be choosing stillness. For Brolin, the adjustment is more complicated. He has always thrived on momentum. Even recently, he spoke about upcoming projects with excitement. Yet, those close to him note a subtle shift in priorities. Home first, work second. Every decision filtered through one question. Does this keep me close to her? He once spent years unable to sleep. Now he guards his mornings fiercely. He knows how fragile companionship becomes in your 80s. He knows how quickly health can change without warning. Whether or not there's a tragic diagnosis behind closed doors, the reality of aging itself is tragic enough. Body slow, energy fades. The world that once demanded your presence eventually moves on. And in that quiet, two people sit together on a bed that has witnessed thousands of conversations. He continues to smile in interviews. She continues to post occasional messages celebrating anniversaries. They mark July 1st as both the day they met and the day they married. Nearly 3 decades of choosing each other. If he is saying goodbye to anything, It may be to the illusion that time stretches endlessly ahead. After almost 30 years together, James Brolin seems determined to protect every remaining morning with Barbra Streisand. Do you think stepping away from the spotlight is a sign of decline or the ultimate form of freedom? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that look beyond the headlines.